My name is Jack Cole. I do not use, nor do I intend to use, marijuana or any other. As a detective lieutenant after a 26-year career with the New Jersey State Police, for 14 of those years I worked as an undercover agent. My investigations span the spectrum of possible cases from street drug users up to billion-dollar international trafficking organizations. I've lived in Massachusetts now for 20 years, and I'm here today to respectfully encourage this committee to support replacing the current failed marijuana policy, prohibition, with a workable system of regulation and taxation. Bills such as S. 1801 will reduce the harms prohibition has imposed on our society, allow police to return to tracking down violent criminals, save billions of tax dollars while creating an additional revenue of billions more, and reduce the number of people using these drugs, especially among our young folks. I'm the executive director of LEAP, or Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, an organization founded by 5 former cops to give voice to law enforcers who believe the war on drugs is not only a dismal failure, but it's also a self-perpetuating and constantly expanding policy disaster. In the 7 years of our existence, we've grown to represent more than 16,000 people, over 700 here in Massachusetts, and we're no longer just cops. We're police, judges, prosecutors, prison wardens, DEA and FBI agents and others who know that a policy of regulation and control of drugs is much more efficient and ethical than a policy of prohibition, because nothing can be regulated or controlled while it's illegal. For 40 years, with a budget of over $1 trillion, the United States has fought the war on drugs with ever harsher policies. We've made more than 39 million arrests in that time of non-violent drug offenders. Nearly half of those arrests were for marijuana violations. And what do we have to show for all these ruined lives and this misspent money? Today, drugs are cheaper, they're more potent, and they're far easier for our children to access than they were in 1970 at the beginning of this bloody mess when I started buying them as an undercover officer. That is the very essence of a failed public policy. As public servants, we all work to ensure quality of life of our citizens, and we seek to support decisions that favor the greater social good. Having an arrest of any kind is certainly a life-altering event. It will impact social statuses, possibly employment status, the ability to secure housing, and it will certainly increase stress within family units. Drug charges and conviction will destroy a college student's opportunity for continued federal financial aid. You know, according to government sources, more than 97 million Americans currently admit to having tried marijuana. How fortunate we are in many ways that they were not all arrested and prosecuted. Nearly 1,000 young people who were experimenting with drugs went to jail as a direct result of what I did out there as one undercover agent. I can't say how many of those folks would have gone on to have a perfectly happy and productive life had I not intervened, but I'm sure that number is huge. Think of all the people you know personally who ever used an illegal drug when they were young, put them behind them as they grew older, went on to have perfectly productive lives. You can do that if you haven't been arrested. We have a saying at LEAP: you can get over an addiction, you will never get over a conviction. A conviction will track you every day for the rest of your life because it's on a computer. You can move to another state, you can even move to another country. Doesn't matter. Every time you go to apply for a new job, it's over your head like a big ugly cloud. That prospective employer looks at that record and says, hey, druggie, we don't want you. Now, the only place you're then wanted is right back in the drug culture, the very group we say we're trying to save these young folks from. The current policy prevents police from solving significant crimes. I want you to understand that. In 1963, before we had a war on drugs, our police in this country were correctly credited with solving 91% of the murders. In recent years, we solve only 61%. The crime rate in the United States has dropped by 40%, almost cut in half since the 1990s. But even with that tremendous reduction in workload, our police still fail to solve 40% of the murders. 60% of all rapes and arsons unsolved. 75% of all robberies are unsolved. We have more police per capita today than we did in 1963. They're better trained, better educated, better paid. They have technology at their disposal that we never even contemplated in 1963. Did we suddenly become incompetent? No. The police, prosecutors, and prison wardens at LEAP believe what has made this tremendous drop in our productivity is that today we spend so much time chasing around nonviolent drug offenders. In addition to the lives that are so needlessly destroyed by nonviolent drug arrests and the valuable time of our law enforcers that is wasted, the financial repercussions of drug prohibition are absolutely staggering. A 2008 report that was commissioned by LEAP and written by Harvard University economics professor Jeffrey Myron estimates that drug legalization would reduce government expenditure by $44.1 billion annually. And roughly $30.3 billion of that would accrue to state and local governments. $13.8 billion would accrue to the federal government. Approximately $12.9 billion of that potential savings annually would result from the legalization of marijuana alone. Dr. Myron further estimates that drug legalization would yield a tax of almost $33 billion per year. This is assuming that legal drugs were taxed at the rate of comparable to those placed on alcohol and tobacco. Approximately $7 billion of those dollars annually, of that revenue, would be a direct result of the regulation and taxation of marijuana around this country. Current policy also results in our children telling us that it is easier for them to buy illegal drugs than it is to buy beer and cigarettes. Of course, the reason for that is no dope dealer on the street is going to ask them for an ID, right? They only want to see one thing: show me the money. This bill will reduce drug use in Massachusetts. In every country where illicit drugs have been decriminalized and regulated, the rate of drug use has been reduced when compared to neighboring countries where they haven't decriminalized. And this reduction has also held true in all the U.S. states where they've passed medical marijuana as a legal commodity, or where marijuana has been decriminalized. So in closing, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to speak here in support of S1801. This bill is an important step to reducing the harms of drug prohibition. And by supporting it, you're speaking out in favor of a public policy that will be far more effective, more ethical, less damaging, and far less costly than drug